Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. This month, at least as of a recording, is November, and it is World Adoption Month. And so in honor of that, I have a wonderful guest here to share with us, Michaela Foster Marsh. She is the author of the book Starchild, which is a memoir about her life with her adopted brother, Frankie, and her journey to learn more about him by reconnecting and finding his family after his tragic death. But she went and found his birth family in Uganda. It's an incredible story, and we'll have her share that. She is an acclaimed musician with 3 albums to her credit, and she is the founder and executive director of Starchild charity. She lives in Glasgow, Scotland, and has received a Prime Minister's Award for her work in Uganda. Michaela, welcome to the Leaders Transformation. We're excited that you're here today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. Delighted.
Pleasure. My pleasure. And a thanks goes also to Interview Valet, because I always acknowledge those who make great connections to Leaders of Transformation, and Interview Valet has certainly done that, and they connected me to Michaela. So thank you to them. Appreciate you. So Michaela, talk to us about, like, your parents back in the 60s adopted a child from Uganda who is Frankie, who is your brother. So tell us about how that came to be, because there's a beautiful story behind that.
Yeah, well, my parents hadn't set out to adopt a black child, or a child from Uganda. They had actually wanted to adopt a hard-to-place child. So on the certificate, they had said that they would accept a hard-to-place child, meaning a child that maybe had a disability, or an older child, or maybe a child with some issues that maybe had just gone through the system. And they were prepared to take that on. And the adoption agency got back to them and said, well, actually, we have a little black boy, and he's now 13 months. He's been with us for 13 months. And he has obviously become hard to place. Would you consider a coloured child, black child? Now, to put it into context, this was in the late 60s, in the midst of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King was assassinated the year that my family adopted Frankie. So it was a very brave thing, and you can understand why there was a reluctancy, to look at a black child. And even then, transracial adoption was unheard of. You just didn't get people adopting coloured children. There was hardly any black people in Scotland at that time. So it was extremely unusual, the set of circumstances. But my parents basically said, we don't care what colour the child is, so long as we feel we bond with the child. So they went out to see Frankie at Tanker Hall Children's Home in Kilmarnock, which is about 20 miles away from where we live. And I think it was love at first sight. I think my mum's biggest concern was how to comb Frankie's hair, because it was so different from our hair. So initially, the adoption agency were very concerned because Frankie and I were identical in age, and they felt there could be territorial issues. So they were quite afraid of putting us together. So he came initially as a foster, and we bonded right away. There was no territorial issues. He used to follow me around. My mum used to say he followed you around you were little toddlers, and he would just follow you everywhere. And the adoption agency could see that there really were no territorial issues. And so Frankie then came to us permanently as a full adoption by 1968, which, like I say, at that time, there was so much tension brewing. Almost today, we're seeing a kind of mirroring of what was happening. So, I used to say to people that it was quite brave. My parents had taken this anti-racism stance at that time, and it kind of went over people's heads, and they didn't really kind of think about it. But now, because of what's happened, now we're being faced with that, looking at that racism issue again. And it does seem to me very much like what was going on then. There's reflective energy there. So now I think people are understanding that it was a very, very unusual set of circumstances that my parents adopted Frankie. So we were pushed around Glasgow in a twin pram, one black, one white, at a time, like I say, when transracial adoption was unheard of, extremely unusual. And people would stop us in the street and they would want to pick up Frankie, they would goo goo gaga over him, they'd want to touch his skin, his hair, the same way as now when I go to Uganda, the children all want to touch me. They want to try and put their finger in their mouth and try and rub my freckles off, you know, because they've never seen freckles, and red hair, and they want to brush my hair because it's soft and they've got this wiry hair. So it was more curiosity people had then, particularly then, because they had really never seen a black child, especially one sitting next to a white milk bottle white redhead in a twin pram. So there was curiosity. There was some racism, which we did suffer from, but I would have said more than anything, people were just so curious about why there was this black and white child together in the pram. The racism was a bit later in life, that arose, you know.
Well, and I think that
to the surface.
That's a great example of when you're young and you see something that's different than you, you naturally have curiosity about it. It's later in life and learned behavior from how others react that you start to judge it as wrong because it's not like you, if that makes sense. And so this whole anti-racism, like you said, it came on later on. The initial thing was curiosity, but later on people started to judge it. It's wrong. He's not welcome. You know, we can talk about that, but it's a learned behavior. And and that's, in a way, it's actually a good thing, because that's something that we can transform, right? We can, if we can look at it differently, we can help people to see it differently, then it can be changed. And that's what this world really needs right now, is to see each other, whether it's me with blonde hair, you with red hair, somebody with, you know, black hair, dark skin, light skin, you know, all of these judgments that we have around it, but to actually see what is beautiful in another person and in their uniqueness and their differences, you know, I think is so important. So can you talk about your experience with that and maybe how that has shaped your view of the world?
Frankie's whole life, I mean, his short life has shaped my life so much. I can't imagine not having had Frankie in my life. I think the most pivotal moment for me, or the moment that stands out, I mean, like you say, I mean, you're not born raised, you don't recognize the color. I hadn't realized I've got a black brother. I just accepted that Frankie was my brother, and it's my first memory was Frankie. I didn't say, oh, you're different, you're black and white. The day that changed was when we were in the bathtub together. Now, we would be about 5 years of age, and we bathed together at that age. And Frankie turned around to my mum and he said, if I scrub really hard, will I become white like Michaela? Now, even my 5-year-old sensibilities realized at that moment, why does my brother want to change the color of his skin? And I sort of said, oh, I want to rub my freckles. You know, if I scrub really hard, will I get rid of my freckles? But I'm thinking, you know, like, why is Frankie so unhappy being the color that he is? I don't see anything wrong with his color. And then my mum went into this kind of explanation, quick as a flash. She kind of started to say about melanin in the skin and how I had different melanin, and Frankie, you know, his biological parents, he had come from Africa and the sun, and that he needed, the darker skin, and that this is why. And she spoke about this family in Africa, and that how they had to get. I mean, he knew he was adopted. There was never any point in us covering up Frankie's adoption because he was a different color. So we were always, you know, told that, but it didn't make any difference to me as a child. But at this moment, it started to dawn on me, yeah, there is a difference. He's obviously concerned about this. So my mum started to talk about Africa. And the way she spoke about Africa, I was like, oh, wow, Frankie's parents come from this exotic country far away and everybody's got dark skin like my brother. You know, oh, I would love to go to Africa. I wanted to know everything about Africa. I wanted to know about his parents. And I was wanting to ask all these questions. And Frankie seemed like really oddly incurious about it. And yet my imagination was set alight at that point at 5 years of age. I was suddenly like, oh, I could get to meet other people like Frankie if we were in Africa. And so it just made sense to me. But yet Frankie, when we were about 10, just fast forwarding to we were about 10, my dad had also been adopted and was very sensitive to the issue. And so he sat us down one day and said, look, Frankie, I have this folder here. It's got some information about your biological family. I just don't want you to think that we're hiding anything from you. If you want to know anything about your Ugandan family, there's some information here. We can try and get you some more. You know, you want to talk about this, you know, sort of just broach the subject very tentatively. And I could see Frankie was really upset. His leg was shaking and he was like, you know, close to tears. And he's like, I don't want to know anything about them. I don't want to know anything about Africa. I'm Scottish. You're my family. And you know, it was quite a different reaction because I was sitting there going, oh, great, I'm getting ready to hear a fairy tale. I'm getting ready to hear all about Africa that I want to know. And yet I've got my brother and he doesn't want to know anything about his biological family. Now, looking at it now, I think he was maybe scared. If you think about it from a 10-year-old's perspective, he might have thought maybe they would want him back, maybe he could get sent back. And as far as he was concerned, he was Scottish. He had grown up with us. We were his family. He loved us. And I think that he was scared. So my dad just closed the folder and said, that's perfectly okay, Frankie. You don't need to know anything. If ever you want to know, the folder's here. If ever you change your mind, we'll try our best to find out as much information as we can. But if you don't want to know, that's fine because we love you, you know, and you're not going anywhere, you know, you're ours. So that was a kind of, again, one of these, you know, moments, and I write about that in the book. But it really, I mean, it was 18 years after Frankie's death before I actually got to Uganda. And the law of probability would say, never in a million years should I have found his family. You know, in a country of 43 million people, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. It was nothing short of a miracle, and I really do believe it was a miracle. The synchronicity, the serendipity, just the coincidences, the things that led me to that family were miraculous. But obviously, I think that somehow all of that was set in motion a long time ago. And obviously, you know, losing, I mean, Frankie was my twin right through school, all through our teenage years, beyond when we would go out to bars and clubs together when we were older. We would still tell people we were twins, to much hilarity. You know, a lot of people thought we were boyfriend, girlfriend because we chummed around all the time, but we would just say, no, she's my twin, or I would say, he's my twin. And then, of course, if people wanted to know, we would explain the circumstances. But we were as close as any biological twin, I believe. And I think the book proves that. And I think that it proves that there is a continuous thread that connects us beyond death. There is no doubt in my mind about that after having had the experiences that I've had, not just with Frankie's death, but with subsequent losses, but certainly getting back to Frankie, you know, that he is still with me. He has shaped that whole journey to Uganda. The delays, the setbacks, I just kept thinking maybe somebody doesn't want me to go, but I kept holding on to that belief that I knew I was supposed to go from a child, that one day I would go to Africa. And it was like something much bigger than me was planning that journey my entire life, so that when I got there, after so many delays and setbacks, I mean, really, most people would have given up and thought, no, the universe, God doesn't want me to go. But I never gave up. I held on to it. And when I did go, it was as if it had been planned my entire life. And, you know, this divine refined intelligence kind of somehow miraculously brought Frankie's family to me. And obviously subsequently I've gone on to work in Uganda. So, but yeah, it's been an incredible journey, just incredible, mind-blowing.
So much that that you shared there is like so rich in terms of your parents, in the way that they showed up, the way that your mother explained the differences when you were 5 in the bathtub, and then your father, and the way that he demonstrated love and openness in saying, look, we are your family, we love you, and I don't want to hold anything from you, withhold anything from you. And even just in doing that, even though I totally, I get where Frankie might have been uncomfortable and afraid at that point, worried about what that would mean for him. But just even knowing that freedom was there. I know there's a lot of adopted children that wish that they could actually, my ex-husband was adopted.
So was mine.
So was mine. Yeah. And he talks about how he actually found his biological mother, and it was one of those divine moments of things that unfolded that never happened, that happened, and but that desire to know. And I think it comes back to this identity, and it's also a testament to your family that Frankie felt so loved, that he felt like he was part of your family, and that he not just was part of your family, but that he actually felt that he was grafted into the family and that he was part of that family. It was really, really powerful, and speaks to how your parents raised you, and certainly your curiosity and so forth, and your nature. But I see that it's like the way that you're also a product of your environment. And what your parents chose.
My parents were a very big influence on me as an individual, and a positive influence, I would say. But I certainly wouldn't want to give the impression that it was easy. Transracial adoption is not easy. Adoption's not easy, and there are definite tensions. And there was tensions between Mum and Frankie that developed over the years, and a lot of testing behaviour and things. And I do talk a bit about that. And like you've had a similar experience marrying somebody who was adopted. So adoption is a theme that has been through my life as well, with my father, my brother, and my ex-husband. So in the book, I kind of talk a bit about that. And again, I'm not an expert on adoption. I can only speak about it through my own lens, what I've experienced and what I believe to be the case. And there is a definite, primal wound there, and sense of abandonment, guilt, shame. It's a very, very complex subject. And anybody thinking of taking that on really needs to seriously look at some of the psychological behaviour of the adopted child. We've come a long way. I mean, when Frankie was adopted, there was little to no help for my parents, and in particular Mum, I think, was the one that was dealing with the brunt of it. I mean, Frankie's need of her created a kind of tug of war with them, and he was always testing her, because there's this sense of, oh, one day they're going to leave me, they're going to ban me because I must have been a bad child. I remember, when my dad had told us that he was adopted, one of the first things that Frankie said to him was, were you bad? And my dad said to Frankie, of course I wasn't bad, just like you weren't bad. We didn't do anything wrong. So in the psyche somewhere in the adopted child, there's this thing that I must have done something wrong, that my mum could have given me up. So there does create a bit of a pattern of kind of testing behaviour that can happen. Now, again, I'm talking about my experience, so there might be people that say, oh, that's not the case at all. But in my experience, it can develop into that. So it's a very complex subject, and we really don't have time to cover all the nitty-gritty of adoption and adoptee in this short podcasts. But I do touch on some of those themes in the book, yeah, for sure.
So talk about the book. Why did you write the book? And give us a little context for it. And I know, like you said, it actually sets the context for you going and finding Frankie's family after he passed, and speak to it, because we've been talking about the fact that he did pass away. Maybe explain how that
yeah, well, at the age of 27, very tragically, Frankie died in an accidental house fire. And obviously, I was devastated. I thought I would never recover from the shock and the horror, the tragedy of losing Frankie. And it did take a long time to go over it. But again, with Frankie's death, there's grief always brings about transformation. There's always a metamorphosis. You know, it's a very difficult process. It's a struggle, but it always brings about, you're not the same person. And each grief that I've gone through, I mean, there was Frankie, then Dad died a couple of years later, then Mum got very ill, and then my partner Ronnie just died last year with lung cancer. So I've had a baseline of grief as well run through my life. So again, I understand the complexities of that grief and how it shapes you. For some people, I guess they can set themselves up in victim mode, and sit in a pity party for the rest of their lives. Even one loss is enough to tip people into that victim mode and believe that, you know, the world and God and everybody's against them. But you've got a choice. And for me, grief, it was almost, maybe the word invitation is wrong, but a gateway. The painful junctures in your life are a kind of gateway to expand the consciousness. It's also brought me much closer to a supernal reality, a supernal world, if you like, which I've been fascinated with from a young age. And I've learnt on that as a way of being able to get through those really dark passages in life and all of those griefs and the losses. So with Frankie's death, you know, I did call upon that prayer, meditation, and, you know, I was completely lost. You know, where am I going to go? You know, and miraculously, his death, I'd written a song, because writing was my way of teasing out my sorrows from a young age. And I had never done anything with my music. And I had decided that I'd written a song for Frankie when he died, for the family, and I tried to do a home recording and it was terrible. So I decided to book some studio time. And I was I was brave. You know, I was really scared to let anybody hear my music. And I was also still grieving Frankie, but I booked some studio time and went in and recorded the song. And I'd booked 3 hours thinking it would take me forever. And it took me about 5 minutes to sit down and play the song. So I ended up, the engineer said, "Oh, you've got all the studio time. Have you written anything else?" And so he kind of teased these songs out of me. And then a week later, I got a call from the studio saying, "I think you should come in and talk to us. We really think you've got a career in music." So Frankie's death had a major transformative effect on my life in not just an emotional way, but in every way. And I ended up going down to Toronto and you know, 3 albums later, here we are. But then again, when I uncovered the folder with all the information about Frankie's adoption after my parents had died, I finally was able to see a name to this woman, this elusive woman, who had kind of almost haunted me my entire childhood, thinking, who was my brother's mother? I mean, it must have haunted Frankie, even though he was oddly incurious about his mother, whereas I was the complete opposite and wanted to know everything about her. And when I found the folder, I was obviously inherited all the paperwork. It set me off on this whole journey of trying to find the family, because just not long before Frankie died, I should have said earlier, but not long before Frankie died, he started to become interested in finding the family. So that curiosity that I think burns in every child that's adopted finally came to the surface, and he did want to find out. And very sadly, he died. So I felt as if there was some way I had to kind of honour him, find out about the family. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just felt a pull to try and find out. And of course I did a search on the net and everything, and I was getting nowhere. The name was really unusual. And I don't want to blow the story by telling you exactly how it all unfolded, because all of that is in the book, that whole miraculous journey of how I uncovered the family. But again, when I started to get some tidbits of information, I started to use my imagination and I invented this woman. And I started to write a fictional book that was very loosely based on Frankie's mum. Completely fictional, didn't have a clue, you know, the information was so scant. And that book, I ended up with a major agent in London interested in the fictional novel, and she said, you need to get yourself to Uganda. And I said, I've been trying to go to Uganda for years. And it wasn't until that point that it was like a switch went and suddenly everything opened up for me, and I ended up being able to go. And when I did go, like I say, it was just incredible. So from the fictional book, which hasn't been published yet, I went to Uganda, found the family, came back home, overwhelmed by the fact that I had 3 new African brothers. Frankie's mother had very sadly died. But I mean, the stuff around that is just incredible, you know, and why she had to give up the child and everything. Again, I'm not going to give all the book away. But I now had this whole new family in Uganda, and I was so overwhelmed by the level of poverty as well that I came back home, and when I was telling everybody the story, they were like, oh my God, this is a book, Michaela, this is incredible, like you need to write this. And so I started to kind of then think about that, and also setting up the charity. And I didn't have a clue about how you go about setting up a charity. And I was really scared because the cultural differences, the challenges in Uganda for me were immense, and the obstacles that were in my way. And yet I was trying to set up a charity. But again, the universe just kept, the doors kept opening. It was just, again, miraculous. Just as an example, I was sitting in my living room floor here with all this paperwork around me, saying, how on earth am I going to, I don't even know how to begin to fill out these applications. The applications were horrendous for charitable status, and I'm saying to myself, oh, it's great, all my friends think I should start a charity, but they've got no idea the work involved. So I remember kind of sending out, going, right, okay, if you want me to do this charity, somebody's going to have to help. And I put a Facebook message out saying, I'm tearing my hair out. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I'm trying to fill out forms for a charity, and I don't, you know, I'm giving up. And within minutes, I'm not kidding, I got a private message from a friend who I went to school with saying, Michaela, I do this for a living. Can I help you?
Wow.
And so Lynn Campbell, she's still on my board today, ended up, you know, I went down and met with her a few days later. We filled out the applications, and on Valentine's Day 2013 we got charitable status, and that was the start of the journey. But just there's all these, you know, even when you get delays and setbacks and everything, it's you'll get signposts, you get things, you get messages from the universe, from God, whatever you want to believe it is, your angels, whatever, that you know, okay, I'm on the right path. When I got that message from Lynn, I said, right, okay, I hear you. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to do it. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but you're going to help my deceased ancestors. You're all going to help, because I speak to them all the time. And I just moved through the fear of setting up that charity, because there's nothing, I mean, it did keep me up at night. I was thinking, once we set the charity up and we got all this money starting, not a lot of money, but money was starting to come in, I was thinking, oh my God, you know, people are giving me their hard-earned money, and I really don't know how to navigate Uganda, and how am I going to start? How am I going to, but you know, it was just one step at a time, just having the faith, the confidence, the belief, the determination, putting aside the fear, and having trust in something bigger than yourself. you know, and that's not to say that there weren't mistakes made, and you know, fortunately not too many, and not any costly ones, but you've got to learn. It's a learning process, and navigating Uganda is definitely a learning curve. But it's been incredible. Now we have a school for the creative arts in Uganda. It's the first of its kind, and we have many other projects. And now I'm working on setting up a holistic centre for children and families affected with disabilities and autism. So yeah, I've learned how to work in Uganda, and we've done it very successfully, I think, and have a strong team here in Scotland that have been with me from the beginning. Most of the people are still with me, thank goodness, thank God, and I have the family in Uganda, which helps a little bit, gives me a bit of kudos, a bit of support there, and it's just wonderful. It's just magical.
When I love what you said there about out of the grief, out of that baseline of grief or that theme that has come through your life, you have transformed it. Like you said, it transforms you. And it's so beautiful what has come out of that on so many levels, and how the you turned it around, and how God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, supports you in that process of that unfolding. And now when you talk about having a school for the arts that is the first of its kind, you know, bringing in your artistic ability as well. I love how things come together, you know, like seemingly like separate, disparate things, how they come together to create something when we are open to it and when we trust. And as leaders of transformation, it's really, it's the key word there is transformation.
Absolutely. And grief allows your consciousness to expand so much. Yeah. That's the thing, and it
connects you to your heart.
It does, and that's what so many people are walking about not connected to. You know, I think we are spiritual beings really having a human experience. I do believe that, and my experiences with grief, like I say, have brought me closer. It's I don't know. I can't.
It's kind of, you get to this point where it's going to shut you off.
Yeah.
Or it's going to open you up.
Yeah.
And you get that choice.
You've got the choice.
Yes.
Exactly. So it's not easy. I mean, you know, I have been to some really dark places. I'm not, you know, saying that it's all happiness and light. It's not. I've been to those dark passages and been there, but I've asked for the help for that divine grace, and it has come, and it has opened up aspects of my life that I could never have imagined had I not had those experiences. And I mean, now I'm writing a lot more about grief. The new book I'm writing, I'm touching on a lot more of these subjects. But there is a definite divine, refined intelligence to our life. Yes. I definitely believe that, and that continuous thread that connects us. But we do have to be open to, appreciative of it, and also experience the gratitude. I mean, when I do prayer and meditation most mornings, unless I'm really rushed, I really do try and allow time for that. And I expect, you know, I sort of look for the signs and the signposts and the little messages, maybe not every day, but I'm open to the expectation that they will come. Those cosmic nudges, as I like to call it, your little nudge, and you go, right, okay, I hear you, you know, I get you. And then you gratitude, you thank them. You know, if somebody here does something for you, you thank them. Well, if you get a little gift from the universe or your angels or whatever you want to say, or a deceased relative, then acknowledge it, thank them, have that gratitude. And I feel when you do that, then they expect more and more come. I mean, and the other day I was talking to somebody and they said, oh, miracles, things don't happen to me like that. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, miracles have happened to you. You just haven't done anything with them. You're afraid of taking up, you know, what you've been offered. because sometimes you do get offered something, but the fear is so great, we can't face the fear. And so we put blocks up, reasons why we're not going to do it. Reasons why, well, I don't think I want that relationship because whatever it happens to be, or the job. But sometimes, we actually end up walking away from things that have been given to us. And, it's easier to blame other people and your boss or your parents or somebody else or a death on the fact that you're doing nothing with your life. I've had so many setbacks and delays and frustrations, and it's never ever been easy, but it never stops me. And I do think that's the difference. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'll sit with my pity party and my bottle of wine, and I'll have those moments. I love those moments. Don't love them the next day, but at the time I enjoy them. Well, I usually involve a lot of tears and a lot of red wine, but then you get up and you go on with it the next day, and it's not staying feeling sorry for yourself. I've got lots I could feel sorry for myself about. I've just lost the love of my life, and I'll never ever go over that. But I know that I'm still alive, and that in order to honor Ronnie's life and the life that we had together, I have to make a life. I have to make a new life. Okay, my dreams of living with Ronnie the rest of my life are shattered. And I've just got to come to terms with that. And I suppose I have a faith that I will see him again and that he's still with me. But that doesn't make it any easier some days to get out of bed and go on with life. But I try and imagine myself just having new infinite possibilities, and that the universe will open up something new for me to step into, and something new to experience. Because like I say, I think that for whatever reason, grief is definitely the most transformative out of everything. And I mean, there are other forms of grief. It's not just the major. I mean, the deaths are major, but divorce is a huge one. I mean, I've gone through a divorce, and I think you have. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, these are major junctures, aren't they? And again, very, very difficult, very traumatic. Nobody goes into a marriage thinking it's going to fail, that it's going to end. And again, it's a call for to heal, transcend, and transform. I think that's the thing that we get called on to do in life. I think every one of us is called to heal, transcend, and transform. And it's important that we do, but so many don't. So many stay stuck, unable to heal and move beyond the pity party.
Yeah, and I think it really is dependent on how you see it. For a while, I saw all the losses, and you mentioned about divorce losses. I've lost loved ones. I've been divorced. There's also all the other losses. I think that as a society, we do not know how to process, and we are not taught how to process grief. It's almost like, we push it away. It's like, it'll be okay. Everything's fine. They're in a better place. And they give you all these reasons, or you lose a business, right? A business fails and you're like, oh, well, you'll be fine. The next one will be better. And we push away the opportunity, like you said, to heal, transform, and transcend. We cut ourselves off from the opportunity. But if we dig into it, if we step into it and look at it and experience it, and allow ourselves to experience the disappointment, the hurt, the pain, we actually reconnect to who we are. And in the process of that, we actually discover more of who we are in that process. And there's a gift in that. I had somebody comment recently about previous pictures that they had seen of me, and then just recently, like my current, we were on Zoom, and she said, well, you're a lot lighter and so forth. And I said, well, I've been purified through fire, right? Yeah. And I say that because the first time I ever said that, I was kind of joking, and then I realized No, I've actually been purified through fire.
Yes, a
And
very good way
it's
of putting it.
and it's a blessing, because that's what, when you think of silver and gold and how it shines brighter, through the process of refining. And so we are being refined all the time. And so it's so powerful. Michaela, thank you.
Allowing yourself to
Yeah.
be refined,
Yes.
surrendering to it.
Yes.
You can't control it. You have no control when somebody dies. You have no control, or if somebody walks out in a relationship, you have no control over it. So you have to surrender to that. And like you say, if you do, the refinement.
Yeah,
It's a
let go
nice
of the
way of putting
resistance.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let go of the resistance and embrace the refinement, if you will.
yeah,
And
yeah.
embrace the opportunity, the miracle. Like you said, there are miracles happening all the time. Oftentimes we don't recognize them. I didn't at one point, and when I was going through it, I didn't necessarily at for certain things, I was like, oh, all these losses. Why do I have to go through this? And you get into that pity party. And yet when I stopped and took some time to really connect to it, and what was the blessing, and look for the blessing in it, and I realized, wow, it is all part of my journey. And it's actually, wouldn't want to go through it again, but I am grateful for it in a way, because I'm grateful for what came out of it. Not
I
necessarily
understand.
for
Yeah,
what
of
happened, but for
course.
what came out of it. And that's I think right now, especially, I think in general, this is something that we all, get to experience in our life right now, as we have just gone through 2020. And this has been a very, very difficult year for people, with all of the things that have gone on, that I think it's confronting people,
Yeah,
right? With an opportunity. Confronting is to stand in front of, right? Is to give them an opportunity, present them with an opportunity to see something in this and learn about themselves in it. But in order to get through that, it's got to be acceptable, right? To grieve, to be able
yeah.
to look at it, rather than pushing it away and let's get on to next year, but to really sit with it. And so, even as those who are listening, this is towards the end of the year, before the year ends, and it's not going to, everything's not going to all of a sudden change by instantly on January 1st. So this is an ongoing process, but to stop and check in, and to say, like, what am I learning through this process about myself? What am I discovering about myself? And if there were blessings that could come out of it, what might they be? And just being open to that, to you're a wonderful example, is to be open to that and saying, what can I do? And one of the words that came up this morning as I was sharing with you is this word tribute. As I was thinking about and preparing for this interview, is that you have turned some of those traumas, if you will, into tributes, into writing the book Starchild, into creating the charity, which I love what's on your website. It says finding the star in every child. You have been doing that. And then, of course, even with your work with you're creating an initiative around for helping families with children of autism. And that's in honor of Ronnie, your late partner. And so it's like you have turned these trials and these challenges into tributes, and saying, how can we honor and bring honor to those experiences, rather than emphasis on just strictly the pain and the loss.
Yeah, keeping people alive through that as well. So often it's like people they want to not talk about the person. It's like the elephant in the room. Let's not, talk about the person who's gone. I don't ever stop talking about Frankie or Ronnie.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to be able to freely talk about people who we are grieving.
Yes.
So often people say, I'll not talk about them. I don't want to mention his name in case that upsets her. I love to talk about Ronnie. Yes. I love to talk about Frankie and mum and dad. And so often when we're grieving, people think, oh, let's not mention the name. It's like, shh, not talk about that person.
Yes.
And I think that's wrong. And also that brings me back to something else that maybe we should do. I know time's running out, but talking about grief, a child who is adopted, they are grieving a mother that they never met.
Yes.
And so often nobody acknowledges that. If somebody would just turn around and say to a child that's maybe adopted, it's a hard thing for a parent, I guess, who's adopted a child to say, but to say to that child, you know, you miss her, don't you? You miss your mum. Because they do. There's that woman gave birth to that child. There's a umbilical cord, there's a connection there that, you know, the new mom and dad, the new adopted parents, they might be doing a brilliant job. It's not anything they're doing wrong, but that child has got that sense of grief that's not even they're not even hardly aware that they're carrying this grief and this sense of abandonment and emptiness for a mother that they never really got to bond properly with. And I think that at a really deep subconscious level, that wound is so strong. And yet it's like the elephant in the room. Like what I experience sometimes when people don't want to bring up Ronnie's name, and I'm desperate to talk about Ronnie. Well, maybe the adopted child might feel the same.
Yeah.
There might be something that says, you know, there's a time and place, and these they're tricky things to bring up. But if a parent could just acknowledge that that child is that you've brought into your home is actually in a state of grief, they might not even be aware of it until, like, you know, Frankie was 27 before he really discovered that he wanted to find his family. My ex-husband was almost 50 before he said, I want to find my family. But at some point they've got that internal loss that's not getting acknowledged, and it needs to be acknowledged, just like all our griefs need to be acknowledged, whether that's the loss of a job, like you say, or a business or whatever. Like we don't give it enough space in our lives and in our own hearts. You know,
Yes.
we need to heal ourselves, and the adopted child has got one of the biggest griefs in life to get over, to work through. They'll never get over it. Like, you don't get over grief, you learn to live with it, and it transforms you, like you say. But yeah,
It's so good.
interesting. I'm just realizing how dark it's got. When we started the conversation, it was nice and bright here, and now suddenly the lights are, it's more shadow and shadow here because it's getting so dark in Scotland so early now. Our clock's just changed. So I've realized that as we've been talking, it started off sunny and now it's got dark and the light's going.
Yeah, no, it looks great, and you've had this little sunbeam or moonbeam or whatever, this little beam of light that has been coming through the window from behind you. This
Oh,
has been so
fab.
beautiful.
Oh, that's
But
fab. I like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, Michaela, thank you so much. This has been
Oh,
rich with
oh, it's been so
insight,
good to talk to you.
and yeah, yeah, it has been a
It's
pleasure. And
nice connection, and yeah, it was nice. Good to know about your ex-husband. That's a nice connection with us both, having experienced that. Although I'm sure there were very different experiences, but you know, it's nice to connect with somebody.
in some
Um,
ways, he, I believe that a lot of the challenges that he experienced in his life were just to what you described, is the wound that he carried. And so I actually don't have an issue talking about him. I still love him
yeah,
as a
same with my
person and so
ex.
forth. And so
Yeah.
when people people do feel awkward, you know, even when I mention his name, and they feel awkward because they don't know how to deal with that. And so because we're divorced, and so it's like, but you know, I still love him as a person, and my heart
I
goes out to
still,
him.
yeah, still
And
love Jerry.
and it's very yeah, and I understand in many ways some of the things that he did, because you just need to look back and understand that wound and what that wound can do if it's not dealt with. So, but anyway, you know what, we could probably talk for hours, and there's so
We
much
could.
here. And so I would encourage our listeners to, number one, we're going to have, of course, all the links in the show notes, but Starchild Charity, check out starchildcharity.com, check out michaelaonline.com. She has had, not only did she just become a really good singer-songwriter, she has performed before Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, so she is worth listening to, clearly. She has been invited to, and this is all in the bio if you want to look at it in the notes. She is invited to sing at film festivals in Monaco and Cannes and so forth. And so she is an incredible artist, and she is doing some incredible things in the world. She is truly a leader of transformation in her own life, and of course in helping others in their life. So go to michaelaonline.com and get a copy of her book, Starchild. I would encourage you to do that. And so I believe that leaders of transformation take action, apply what you learned here, even if it's just, if that taking action is actually you stepping back and getting some quiet time with yourself to really process through some of the grief that you've, and the losses that you've experienced, to see, well, what Michaela has had incredible blessings that have come out of it, or things that she's been able to birth out of it. What could I learn? What could I experience? What could I gain? What miracles are waiting there for me if I were just to look at it differently? And so I encourage you that. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.